Welcome to Love Lies Chronicles.
I should have seen the signs earlier. Looking back, I could pinpoint the exact moments where she had started to lose respect for me. It wasn't sudden, it crept in like a slow poison, eating away at the foundation of what I once believed was a partnership. The way she dismissed me in conversations, the way she spoke about me to her friends as if I were some background character in her life. The worst part? I had ignored it. Convinced myself that maybe she was just stressed, that maybe I needed to try harder to win her attention back. But the night I finally woke up, that was different. It was a dinner party at our house, filled with her coworkers, her friends, the people whose opinions she seemed to value more than anything else. I had spent hours setting things up, making sure everything was perfect. I cooked, I cleaned, I played the perfect husband, while she basked in the compliments and attention like a queen holding court. And then it happened. Someone, a friend of hers, I think, made a casual joke about marriage. Something about how relationships were about compromise. That was when my wife laughed. Loudly. Compromise? Oh, please. He's the one always trying to please me. It's kind of cute, honestly. A ripple of laughter followed her words, but my ears were ringing too much to hear it. I froze, mid-sip of my drink. My grip tightened around the glass, the ice clinking against the sides as my mind caught up with what she had just said. The way she spoke, like I was some eager little fool desperate for her approval, as if I were beneath her. I glanced around the room. A few people looked uncomfortable, shifting in their seats, but no one said anything. No one called her out. Because that's how it had always been. She was the dominant one, the social butterfly, the charismatic one who could say whatever she wanted, and people would just nod along. And me? I had let it happen. I had spent years working to make her happy, thinking that's what love was. I picked up extra shifts so she wouldn't have to worry about money. I took care of the house when she was too busy with her friends. I overlooked the fact that she barely acknowledged my presence unless she needed something. And yet, here she was, mocking me, in front of a crowd. I put my glass down, steadying my expression. I wanted to be angry, to feel something explosive, but instead, I just felt numb. Because in that moment, I realized something. She wasn't afraid of losing me. She thought I would always be there, always chasing after her, always trying to make things work. She thought she could humiliate me, and I would still wake up tomorrow, eager to serve her. She thought wrong. The rest of the night was a blur. I didn't say much, just played along, nodding when necessary, pretending like her words hadn't shattered something inside me. But deep down, something in me had changed. I didn't know what I was going to do yet, but I knew one thing for certain. I was done trying, and she was about to realize what that meant. I woke up the next morning feeling different. For the first time in years, I wasn't waking up with the usual sense of obligation, the silent checklist in my head of things I needed to do to keep her happy. I lay there for a moment, staring at the ceiling, replaying last night's humiliation in my mind. The way she had laughed, how easily she had dismissed me as nothing more than an afterthought. Normally, I would have shrugged it off, made an excuse for her, maybe even convinced myself to try harder. But I wasn't that man anymore. I wasn't going to announce my decision. There would be no dramatic confrontation, no argument where I demanded she respect me. No, she would feel the shift. It started small. She had gotten used to me being the one to take care of everything, smoothing out the rough edges of her life without her even noticing. The first test came that morning. She walked into the kitchen, her silk robe barely tied, her phone in one hand as she scrolled mindlessly. Usually, I would have had her coffee ready, the way she liked it, light with a hint of vanilla syrup. But today, I sat at the table, sipping my own coffee, reading the news on my phone. She paused by the coffee maker, frowning as she looked at the empty countertop. "You didn't make coffee?" she asked, her voice laced with mild confusion. I barely glanced up. "Nope." She hesitated, as if waiting for me to get up and fix it. When I didn't, she let out a small huff and started making it herself. I watched out of the corner of my eye as she fumbled with the machine. She knew how to use it, of course, but she hadn't had to in a long time. That was the first crack. The second came later that day. She called me at work, something she rarely did unless she needed something. "Hey," she said, her voice overly casual. "Can you pick up my dry cleaning on your way home?" She had said it like it was a given, like it was my duty. I leaned back in my chair, considering my response. "No," I said simply. A pause. "What?" "I'm busy. You can pick it up." Her silence stretched for a moment, as if she was trying to process the fact that I had just told her no. "Fine," she muttered before hanging up. It was a small victory, but an important one. She was beginning to realize something was different. The real test came that weekend. She had made plans with her friends, brunch at some trendy new place she had been raving about for weeks. Normally, I would have been the one driving her there, waiting patiently as she gossiped and drank overpriced mimosas. But this time, I had my own plans. I had spent years making her schedule the priority, fitting my life around hers like a devoted servant. But not anymore. When she came downstairs, dressed to impress, she barely spared me a glance. "I need you to drop me off at Madison and Fifth," she said, slipping on her heels. "It's just easier than me calling a ride." I took a sip of my coffee, then leaned back in my chair. "Can't. I've got plans." She finally looked at me, her brows knitting together. "Plans?" "Yeah. I'm heading out." She blinked, as if trying to process the idea that I had something to do that didn't revolve around her. "What plans?" she asked, suspicion creeping into her voice. I smiled slightly. "You don't need to know everything I do, do you?" That got to her. I saw the flicker of irritation cross her face, but she masked it quickly. "Fine," she said coolly. "I'll call a car." She turned on her heel and walked out. But I knew she felt it. The change. The lack of control. As the days passed, the shift became impossible for her to ignore. She was used to being the center of attention, the one who dictated the flow of our lives while I followed without question. But now, she was starting to feel what life was like without my constant effort. The bills? I paid my half, but no more. The house? I cleaned up after myself, but the rest? I left it as it was. The little favors? The things I used to do without her asking? I stopped, and slowly, cracks started to form. I caught her staring at me sometimes, watching, waiting for me to cave. She'd test me with small things, trying to pull me back into the role I had once played. "Babe, can you grab me a bottle of water?" "Nope, you're closer." "Can you help me with this?" "Figure it out." At first, she tried to act like she didn't care, like my distance didn't bother her. But I saw the way her frustration grew with each passing day. She had taken me for granted for so long that the idea of me not bending to her every whim was throwing her off balance. And I enjoyed watching it happen. Because for the first time in years, I felt like I had control again. She had humiliated me, thinking I'd keep trying to win her back. But now she was the one trying to figure out what was happening. And it was only the beginning. At first, she acted like nothing was wrong, like my sudden disinterest in catering to her every need was just a phase. She still moved through life as if she was untouchable, spending money freely, making plans without consulting me, assuming that, eventually, I'd snap back into the man who chased her approval. But life has a way of humbling people, and she was about to learn that the hard way. It started with the house. I had always been the one to handle things, cleaning up, fixing leaks, making sure the bills were paid on time. She never had to think about it because I was always one step ahead, ensuring everything ran smoothly. But now, I only worried about myself. Dishes piled up in the sink. Laundry sat in baskets, untouched. The floors, once spotless, gathered dust. And she noticed. I caught her glancing around one evening, her lips pressing into a thin line as she stared at the mess. "Are you not going to clean this up?" she asked, arms crossed. I shrugged. "I clean up after myself. You can do yours." She scoffed, shaking her head as if I was being childish. "So this is how it's going to be? You're just going to let the house go to shit?" I leaned back in my chair, taking a slow sip of my drink. "I mean, if it bothers you, you can always clean it." Her jaw clenched. She opened her mouth to argue, then closed it, storming off instead. For the first time in a long time, she was facing the reality of her own neglect. The next crack in her perfect world came when money started getting tight. I had always made sure we lived comfortably. I covered more than my fair share of expenses, ensuring she never had to worry about a thing. But now, I paid exactly half. Nothing more. The rest? That was on her. And it didn't take long for her to feel the weight of it. One evening, as I sat in the living room, I heard her cursing under her breath as she scrolled through her banking app. "Why is the electricity bill overdue?" she muttered, mostly to herself. I barely looked up. "Because I paid my half. You need to cover yours." She turned to me, eyes flashing. "You've always handled the bills." I set my drink down. "Yeah, and you've always dismissed what I do like it didn't matter. So, congratulations. Now you get to handle your share." She exhaled sharply, running a hand through her hair. "This is ridiculous. You're just trying to punish me." I chuckled, shaking my head. "No, sweetheart. I'm just giving you exactly what you wanted, independence." She didn't have a response for that. because she knew she had nothing to stand on. The real breaking point, though, that came when she started losing face in front of the people she cared about most, her friends. She had built an entire identity around being the effortlessly put-together woman, the one who always had her life in perfect order. But now, things were slipping. She started missing her salon appointments because money was tight. The expensive brunches with her friends? Less frequent. The designer shopping sprees? Non-existent. And people noticed. I overheard a conversation between her and one of her closest friends while she was on the phone. "What's going on with you lately? You never go out anymore." She forced a laugh. "Just been busy. You know how it is." But her friend wasn't buying it. "Busy? Or is something wrong? You haven't even posted anything online in weeks. That's not like you." I didn't hear the rest of the conversation, but I saw the way she sat there afterward, staring at her phone like it had betrayed her. For the first time, she was feeling what it was like to not be admired, to not be envied, to be just ordinary. It all came crashing down one Saturday evening. She had tried to put on a show, dressing up in an expensive outfit she had probably put on a credit card, acting like everything was normal. But I could see it, the stress in her eyes, the slight hesitation in her movements. She was barely holding on. And then, in the middle of dinner, she cracked. "You're ruining us," she blurted out, slamming her fork onto the table. I looked up from my plate, calmly. "How so?" She threw her hands up. This bullshit game you're playing. You're acting like a stranger. You're letting everything fall apart just to prove a point." I set my utensils down carefully, meeting her gaze. "I'm not proving a point. I'm just done trying harder than you." She opened her mouth, then shut it, swallowing whatever argument she had been about to throw at me. For the first time, I saw something in her expression that hadn't been there before. Fear. Because deep down, she was finally realizing the truth. I wasn't the desperate, eager husband she had humiliated in front of her friends anymore. I wasn't the man who would bend over backward to keep her happy. I had stopped trying. And without me carrying the weight of her life, everything was slowly crumbling. She thought I'd always be there, chasing her, fixing things, making sure she never had to feel discomfort. But she was wrong. And now, she was watching her entire world collapse, brick by brick. She tried to act tough. For the first few days after our confrontation at the dinner table, she put on a front, pretending like she didn't care, like she could handle the shift in our dynamic. But I knew better. I watched her, the way she fumbled through things she had never bothered to do before. The bills stacking up, the empty fridge, the laundry piling in the corner, the weight of reality pressing down on her shoulders in ways she never expected. And she was unraveling. It started with the little things. She stopped snapping at me, stopped making passive-aggressive comments, stopped acting like she was above everything. Instead, she started reaching out tentatively at first, like testing the waters. One night, she sat down next to me on the couch, something she hadn't done in a long time. "You want to watch something together?" she asked, her voice softer than usual. I didn't even look up from my phone. "Nah, I'm good." I could feel her eyes on me, waiting for me to say more, to offer something to ease the distance between us. But I didn't. She had spent years making me feel like I was disposable, a background character in her world. Now, she was the one feeling it, and I wanted her to sit in that feeling. Her social circle, the people she had always prioritized over me, started fading away. It wasn't immediate, but I noticed the shift. The texts from her friends became less frequent. The brunch invitation stopped. One night, I overheard her on the phone with one of her closest friends. "Why don't we go out this weekend?" she asked, trying to keep her voice casual. Her friend hesitated. "I don't know. I think we're all just doing different things now." That was code. Code for, "You're not the same person anymore. You don't bring anything to the table now." I saw the way her face fell when she hung up. For the first time, she was facing the same loneliness she had made me feel for years. And she didn't like it. Reality finally hit when she couldn't keep up with the bills. She had been living under the illusion that she could handle things without me, that she was independent, self-sufficient. But when the credit card was declined at the grocery store, that illusion shattered. She came home that evening, her face pale, her lips pressed together. I was sitting at the table, casually reading, sipping my coffee. She stood there for a moment before finally speaking. "I need help," she admitted, her voice barely above a whisper. I glanced up at her, meeting her eyes for the first time in what felt like weeks. "Help with what?" She let out a shaky breath, running a hand through her hair. "The bills. I miscalculated some things. I just need a little help catching up." I set my cup down slowly, studying her. This was it. The moment she had to face the truth. I leaned back in my chair. I already pay my half. Her throat bobbed as she swallowed. Yeah, I know. But I'm struggling. I tilted my head, as if considering it. That's funny, because I seem to remember you making it very clear that I wasn't your priority, that I was just someone trying to please you. Her face twisted in shame. I didn't mean that. I exhaled through my nose, shaking my head. But you said it. She bit her lip, looking down at the floor. I was stupid, okay? I didn't appreciate what I had. I let her words hang in the air. Finally, she was admitting it. But I wasn't about to make it easy for her. That night, she broke. I found her sitting at the kitchen table, her face buried in her hands. She wasn't crying, not yet. But I could see the weight of everything pressing down on her. When she finally spoke, her voice was raw. I don't like this, she admitted. I took a slow sip of my drink. Like what? This. Distance. This feeling like I'm losing you. I raised an eyebrow. I thought I was just a guy trying to please you? She flinched. I never should have said that. Silence. Then, finally, she whispered, I miss us. I let those words settle in. I had waited for this moment, for her to realize what she had thrown away, what she had taken for granted. But the real question was, did I even care anymore? Her words hung in the air. I miss us. For years, those words would have meant everything to me. I would have done anything to hear them, to feel like I was wanted, appreciated, needed. But now, they felt like an echo of something that had already died. I stared at her across the kitchen table, watching the way she fidgeted with the hem of her shirt, how her eyes darted between me and the floor, like she was afraid of my answer. She should be, because I wasn't the man who would drop everything to make things right anymore. That version of me had died the night she laughed at me in front of her friends. I know I hurt you, she said, her voice softer than I had ever heard it before. I took you for granted, and I said things I shouldn't have. I leaned back in my chair, arms crossed. Yeah, you did. She inhaled sharply, as if she wasn't expecting me to agree so easily. But she should have. For weeks, she had been watching everything around her crumble, the house, the finances, her friendships, her sense of control. And now, she was facing the hardest truth of all. She had lost me. I don't want to lose you, she whispered. I want to fix this. There it was. The desperation. The realization that I was no longer under her spell, that I wasn't the man she could walk all over anymore. I studied her for a long moment, letting the silence stretch. Then, finally, I asked, why? She blinked, caught off guard. What? Why do you want to fix this? I tilted my head, watching her closely. Because you actually care about me? Or because your life is falling apart without me? Her lips parted slightly, as if the question stunned her. She should have seen it coming. Because the truth was, I had been asking myself the same thing. Was she realizing my worth? Or was she just afraid of what her life looked like without me carrying the weight? Tears pooled in her eyes, but I didn't move. I didn't reach out. I didn't console her like I used to. Because for the first time in years, I was finally free. And I wasn't sure I wanted to go back. She leaned forward, her fingers gripping the edge of the table. I know I was selfish. I know I was awful to you. But I can change. We can fix this. We can go back to how things were. I exhaled, shaking my head. No, we can't. Her breath hitched. Why not? Because I'm not that man anymore. She swallowed hard. I don't understand. I met her eyes, making sure she saw the truth in mine. You didn't love me. You loved what I did for you. You loved the version of me that bent over backwards to make your life easier while you sat back and watched. That's not true, she whispered, but her voice wavered. I gave her a humorless smile. Isn't it? Then why did it take me pulling away for you to notice me? Silence. Her lips trembled, her hands tightening into fists on the table. I thought you'd always be there, she admitted, her voice barely above a whisper. I thought you'd always try. I nodded. Yeah, you did. She wiped at her face, her frustration and sadness blending into something else, regret. But regret wasn't enough. Not anymore. I stood up, pushing my chair back. I spent years trying to be enough for you. Trying to make you happy, trying to earn your love. And the one time I needed you to do the same for me, you laughed in my face. She opened her mouth to argue, but I cut her off. You humiliated me, I said, my voice calm but firm. You treated me like I was nothing. And now that you've seen what life is like without me carrying you, you suddenly want to fix things. I let out a slow exhale. No, I'm done. She shook her head frantically, standing up as well. Wait, please, just think about it. We've built a life together. I grabbed my keys and looked at her one last time. No, I built a life for you. And with that, I walked away.
Dear listeners, please share your thoughts in the comments, and do not forget to like, share, and subscribe to the channel.